Great, thank you, Allie. I'm going to start out with a couple things here. I'd like to start with an opening acknowledgement. Every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed to their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their will. Some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hope of a better life. And some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across barriers of heritage and difference. We are in Jackson, Wyoming, on the ancestral lands of the Eastern Shoshone tribe, and we acknowledge others, the Arapaho, Bannock, Blackfeet, Cheyenne, Crow, Grovon, Kiowa, Nez Perce, and Ute tribes who have historic ties to this place. We pay respects to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us here today. I also wanted to let everybody know what the Bull-Bransom Award is, because that's why we're here today. So for anyone who does not know about the Bull-Bransom Award, it's an award that's given annually by the museum to recognize excellence in the field of children's book illustration, and that has a focus on nature and wildlife. The award is named after Charles Livingston Bull and Paul Bransom, who were among the first and finest American art illustrators to specialize in wildlife subjects. Both had a tremendous impact on younger artists, and both illustrated numerous children's books. We have many thanks to give to museum trustee and Bull-Bransom founder, Lynn Fries, who started this annual award in 2010. And now I am pleased to introduce the winner of this year, 2020, the Bull-Bransom Award. There are some really good things that happened in 2020. Jessica Lanan is an author, illustrator, and painter who currently resides in Boulder. She grew up in Longmont, Colorado, and in her youth, she spent time hiking and camping in the Rocky Mountains. She studied fine art at Scripps College, and after graduation, traveled solo for a year in various parts of Asia on a Thomas J. Watson Fellowship. Her purpose there was to study and illustrate folk tales. This all sounds amazing to me. She brought a travel set of watercolors on that trip, and she's been painting ever since. Jessica says that through her many publications, she helps young readers discover the beauty and diversity of the world by creating books that are inspiring, accessible, and memorable. My goal, she says, is to help children understand that they are part of the natural world. We are so happy to have her here with us today. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you, Tammy. And thank you, Allie, and everyone who's made this happen. I'm so excited to be with you. Yeah, so if it's all right, I'm gonna read a little bit of the book. Let me figure out what I'm doing here. And then I have it here as a sort of a presentation. I'm going to read a section of it, and reading, keep in mind, this is a wordless book. So I'm just going to kind of wing it with the words, and then we'll discuss from there. So let me share my screen. Let's see here. There we will.
Also, while she is setting that up, the Fisherman and the Whale is available in the museum shop right now. And for the entire week, so until December 5th, we are doing 20% off in the museum shop. So if you would like to get that Fisherman and the Whale, this is a good week to do so.
Great. Thank you, Allie.
It looks good. You look good, Jessica. Go ahead.
Got it? You can see it? Okay. So yes, this is my book, The Fisherman and the Whale, my first book as an author and illustrator. And I'll just take you through a few of the pages. So we begin here on the dock of father and son. This is my favorite painting of the whole book, actually. This quiet moment on the end pages. And the Fisherman and the Whale. the fisherman and the whale work every day on their boat out on the water, and they work really hard hauling in their nets full of fish to sell at the market from dawn to dusk, the whole day. And they feel alone out there in the water, but underneath there's something else. There's someone else. And here we see the whales swimming in their pod. But there are some dangerous things in the water. Some fishing lines and nets. These cages are for catching crabs. And sometimes they're left behind by fishermen. They get damaged or they get lost and they float around. And the whale gets tangled up in this leftover fishing gear. And she's trying to keep up with the rest of her pod, but she gets tangled. And she gets more and more twisted up and caught until she can't keep up anymore. And this is the page that my editor Liz called the depressing whale page. But it's important to me to show the way that she might be feeling in that moment. So I'm going to stop there. I know that's kind of a depressing moment to stop at, but I can't do the whole book. Spoiler alert, things do improve for the whale, so don't worry. It's not entirely a downer. I'll give, for those who haven't read it.
Those are beautiful images, Jessica.
Thank you.
Did you want to start a little bit? I know I said a little bit about your background, but would you like to fill everybody in? I think that's a nice teaser to the book, and it's good to know that the whale is going to be okay.
Well, it's really the story of this interaction between two entirely different species that live in different environments, but have their own intelligence and their own shared experience of the world. So through the fisherman and his attempt to rescue this whale, he gets to kind of bridge that gap between his world and the whale's world. And before we move on, I wanted to say a little bit about why it's a wordless book, because I think that might be kind of interesting. The book started out as a wordless book, and then we added words in and then took them out again. But I really like the idea of this particular book being without words, because I wanted it to feel kind of half in the world of the whale and half in the world of the people. And I felt like if I put a language on there, if I put an English language, it would pull us back into the world of people and kind of anthropomorphize the whale a little bit, because whales have their own language. They sing to each other, they speak beautifully. And since I can't write it in both English and whale, I decided to write it with something that both whales and humans could experience, which is something visual. So that's why I made that decision. But yeah, I have a little slideshow with pictures to entertain you all about me. So we can do a little bit of a bio of how I became a writer and illustrator. If that sounds good to you?
That sounds fantastic. Thanks, Jessica.
Presentation number 2. Let's get this figured out. Sorry, you would think I would be better at Zoom by this point, but apparently not. So
you're doing great. We all are still learning, even though it's been many months. Zoom is still new technology.
I appreciate it. Okay, let's share this one. There we go. Present. All right. No, yes. There is me. I started out, probably this is my greatest moment ever. As all children should be, covered with food or dirt or both, propped up on a rock somewhere. Also, shout out to my mom. Thank you for scanning all these pictures for me. Thanks, Mom. Uh, she was good enough to go through the albums. So yeah, we did so much camping and hiking, and in the winter we did a lot of cross-country skiing in the Rockies. It seemed like it was almost a weekly thing, climbing on. I'm the smaller of the two there on the left, climbing on things. I'm practicing my pull-ups on my dad's hang glider. My pull-ups have not improved since that time. But yeah, just spending a lot of time in the Rocky Mountains in nature. It felt like such a normal thing. Like I foolishly thought that all children, you know how when we're little, we think that everybody else's experience is just like ours. And I thought all kids spend their time, frolicking in mountain meadows. And I came to realize that that's not true. For a lot of children, this is something they can't access. And also through the decades, I've seen these landscapes. I've also seen them change. And that's something that has informed the type of stories I want to tell, because this was back when all the trees were still alive. Now you might go up there in Summit County and see half of those trees dead from the pine beetle, or big massive fires that have swept through, or drought. So the landscape has really changed. It's been affected by human activity. A lot of the places that we went camping have been torn up by ATVs and stuff like that. So it's a very personal experience for me to see the kind of environmental degradation going on around us. I also loved animals. This is maybe not recommended activity, but at the time, this was I think St. Elmo up by Mount Princeton. You could like feed it was like a thing. You could go feed these chipmunks. It was my favorite thing in the entire world. There I am. So I made books. I was always drawing, and I like to read. And this is the first book I ever made. It was called Skeleton Dog, about the dog down the street that I think they shaved its fur like that. I don't know, but I made up a story about it. It was a pop-up book. My first author page there, you see. And then this is my second book about the great horned owl. It's a nonfiction, this one. This is like the mouse's view, mouse's last view right here. And then when I don't know what year this was, I don't remember, but we took a trip to the Oregon coast. And I realize now that this probably influenced The Fisherman and the Whale, I think, if we go way back, because it's that landscape of like the foggy ocean scenery. And we went on a whale watching tour, and I saw humpback whales for the first time. So this really affected me. I know for a fact, because I came home and I did this school project. And there's the humpback whale model that I made, and did research about whaling and the history of hunting whales and how they've been recovering or not recovering. So I was definitely interested in them for a long time. And just animals in general. We worked at the wildlife rehabilitation shelter when I was in high school. And we got to take home these baby raccoons, because baby raccoons have to be fed every few hours, kind of like human babies. So there, I'm hanging out with the raccoons on the roof. And then I kind of forgot about illustration. I guess I didn't really think it was a real job. Like I thought, I don't know. I mean, obviously people make books. I just didn't know any. So I kept thinking I would do something else, like medical illustration, or like my mom, she worked as a patent illustrator. So like I thought illustration had to be kind of used in a non-narrative way. And I got back into it when I traveled after after college. Tammy, you mentioned that I did a year of travel for the Thomas J. Watson Fellowship. And that was a really cool opportunity because I basically got paid to go travel around the world making pictures in my sketchbook, which was a dream come true. So I started learning how to paint. These are some really early watercolors from India and Japan, and some drawings of all kinds of cool stuff. And I met so many interesting people, and people were so wonderful and welcoming and had so many interesting stories to tell. So that was kind of the beginning of wanting to keep telling stories with pictures. That's the end of my slides. So yeah, that was
That's
where
amazing.
it came from. And I guess I had to learn how to do it after that. And I didn't really know how to illustrate. So I spent a good 10 years, I guess, practicing and making bad portfolio pieces, going to conferences and hearing from some incredible authors and illustrators through the SCBWI, which was a really big influence on my, I think most of what I learned through that organization, and just the generosity of authors and illustrators who contribute to it and make themselves available to answer questions and help people who are starting out. So it was mostly just trial and error and a whole lot of failure. So that's my story of how I came to be an author and illustrator.
What was your first book, Jessica?
The first book that was traditionally published, well, the first book was the pop-up book, but
Yeah.
the first one that was, which I actually have right over here, it was called Good Fortune in a Wrapping Cloth, which was published by Shen's Books, which is now part of Lee and Low. And it is about a girl and her mother who are separated, and the mother goes to the emperor's or the king's court, and the daughter wants to become a great seamstress like her mother so she can join her there, which is a really lovely story. And I had a lot of fun doing the research for that because it's fiction, but it has a nonfiction element to it, which I think a lot of my work does. So that was my first book. That came out in 2011, I think. 2011.
Okay. That's one I would like to check out. I'm sure some other people too. The Fisherman and the Whale, you said probably it was that time you spent on the Oregon coast that really inspired it. Was there, so after you've done several books, how did it evolve that you thought, oh, it's time for me now to write about a whale?
Yeah. So there were several things that came together. I had been listening to a podcast about animal intelligence and different types of intelligence in different species and how we perceive the world. And then there also around the same time were several news stories about whales that had been entangled. One was off the coast of San Francisco, and I think it was a fisherman who ended up liberating the whale or helping with its rescue somehow. So there was that in the news, and then that was in the back of my mind, and so was the sort of the imagery from the trip to the coast way back when I was a kid. And then I went to a music concert of all things, and there was this beautiful piece of music called Soledad, which means, I think, solitude or loneliness. And it was a quintet with a cello and I think a piano. Anyway, so there were all these like very whale-like sounds made by the cello. And it just sounded like the story, like the whole thing. While I was sitting there listening, just kind of in my mind, I saw the whole story. So I came home and I wrote it down really quick. Actually, I found the page. This is it. This is draft one. Wrote the entire thing. So it started out that way. And then it took a long path because I did not have a literary agent at the time. I had not authored anything at the time. So I was kind of working on it by myself and trying to find a way for it to become a book. Not really having any strong contacts in traditional publishing. So it took a while before it made it.
There's a question that someone already asked about that. How difficult was it to sell a non, there's no text with your book, that you just have a book with images? Was that difficult to, what were the steps kind of, I guess,
Sure.
did you go through to get to that point where
Yeah,
somebody would publish it?
Good question. So I made a few samples. I finished a dummy. I made a dummy book, which here it is, my dummy book.
Does the dummy book have words?
It does not, no.
Okay,
And
I
a lot
love
of
this. So the
some
draft
of the
started
things
as,
are quite similar.
oh,
Other pages are not at all similar. It had a lot more boxes. It was like a
Graphic novel, sort
more
of?
like a graphic novel. Yeah, I think I'd been looking at some books like that and had it more like a graphic novel. And when we were editing, the feedback was always fewer boxes. So we got rid of a lot of it. But yeah, some of it's pretty close to what you saw in the final. So I made this, and I made a couple of samples, and I entered the SCBWI portfolio show in New York. I can't remember what year this was, but anyway, I brought this with me, but I was too shy to show it to anybody, so I just carried it around in my pocket. And my agent got in touch with me after looking at my portfolio. So he liked my work. He asked me if I had any projects, and I sent him the draft, and we worked back and forth on it for a while. And then he helped me polish it, and we added the words in, because it's easier for editors. They can easily take out the words, but it's hard to imagine adding them in. So we put them in there so that, and that was a really good exercise too for me, to make sure the story was clear. And then we sent it out to publishers. And I remember I was very heartbroken because one publisher had an extremely similar book by Mordecai Gerstein, who is a Caldecott winner. So I felt really, really upset. Like, I have this idea, and somebody already had the idea, and oh no, they're going to think I'm ripping off Mordecai Gerstein. But even though there's a lot of similarities, the books are still pretty different. And it turns out that happens a lot, where more than one person has the same idea around the same time, and it's just a thing that happens. Sometimes you have a bunch of whale books all come out at once, and the universe decided it was time for whales.
it's whale season, obviously.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a book of sketches, basically a dummy book of sketches for every page with a couple of pieces of more polished art. And that's what we submitted to publishers.
That's interesting that you put the words in and then take them back out. That is a process to go through. That's so that you get your characters to tell the story just through the imagery. That's very interesting.
And you can do a lot just with the image, in terms of body language it's been fun to see young children read the book, because then they can do it themselves. They can like put in the words themselves. So my daughter, when she was like 18 months, she really liked this book a lot, because she would like narrate it and say like, oh, they're cutting the lines and Papa's saying no, or whatever. So that was kind of cool to see how a kid reads a wordless book.
Did your human figures have any, do they have any connection to people that you know, or was it just, like you said you heard the story about the fisherman who had trapped a whale, or you read the story?
Yeah.
How did they develop?
They're not modeled on anyone specific. The addition of, so originally the story only had a fisherman. The addition of the son, of the child, was my editor Liz Costner's idea. Good idea. Because then we can have, the one thing I love here, I'm gonna just hold up this book, I don't know if this is gonna work, is the father and child, and then we have also the whale and her child there. So that way we have a little more of a kid's connection, accessible for kids. My fisherman, partly I chose the way he looks so that he would be visible and stand out against the gray and blue. He wears yellow. Here's some little drawings of him planning. So he wears this really bright clothing, which I think maybe is why fishermen do wear that kind of thing, so they're visible. Like you don't want to wear camo, If
you go overboard, you might want to be seen.
Yeah. And originally he wore the same thing for the whole book, but everybody was concerned that he would drown if he jumped in the water wearing his full clothes, which I kind of like, nobody would do that. So he changes out of his yellow overalls and puts on like he's just got his long johns, right? But still had to have some color in there, so you can tell where he is. And the red beard was part of the same. And also kind of makes him look like a Viking. I don't know. I don't know why I wanted to do that, but I did. So.
Can I ask, Jessica, so you mentioned your 3-year-old kind of reading this book, like as an artist, you're really, handing away your artwork for complete interpretation without those words. How does that make you feel? Like, do you get excited about the different interpretations? Can you share a little bit about that?
That's a really good question. I think that I feel more comfortable communicating through pictures than I do with words. Not that I don't like to write or speak. It just, I feel like I can say more clearly and exactly what I want to say with a picture. And when I use words, I fumble around and say the wrong thing and regret what I said. And so it comes really naturally to me to talk with pictures. And that was something I did a lot of on that trip around Asia, where I would be in situations where I actually could not communicate. Like I studied Japanese, so I was okay there. But when I was in India, there's a lot of places where people, there's so many languages in India that are spoken. And I would end up in some small village where people speak a language like Gadi or something, and I haven't a clue what they're saying, and they haven't a clue what I'm saying. And you can communicate if you can draw a picture, which I think is such a lovely idea. Like, we don't need to speak the same language. I can draw for you what I want to say, and also I could share. Like, I remember an experience sitting on a train platform with these children who I couldn't speak to, and they were asking me for things, which they wanted, like rupees or candy or whatever. And I was, instead of having something like that to hand them, I was drawing. So I drew them little pictures, like little portraits of them, and I could give that to them. And I feel like it's such a nice way to communicate, to be able to communicate with a drawing, and you can put emotion into it, and you can put information in it. There's so much you can do with it.
That's a very
love
nice
that.
thought. Yeah. Well, we do have a couple questions about how you got started in illustration. For one, did you have a mentor? Because you said that you hadn't thought that that was a job, even that was possible that somebody could do that.
Yeah, I think I didn't have any one specific mentor, but through joining the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, I found a community. So I got to hear from a lot of experienced authors and illustrators and hear about how they got their start and how they did it. And then also I got to meet a lot of friends who, like me, were trying to get into illustrating and writing. So we could share the experience of, the frustration of failure, and what it's like to get reviews and all those kind of things, and go through that together and not feel like we were just completely on our own. So that was really helpful, just having that community. I recommend it to anybody who wants to learn.
That sounds like a great way to get started. Get a little help from your friends.
And be a part of that community. I think that is really important, especially for artists, because it is hard to, really crack through and to accept being an artist as your life and as your profession. So to have those people around you.
It's such a solitary kind of process too. So if you can relate to some people that are doing the same kind of thing, that's really helpful, because you have to kind of get inside of yourself to do the work. So I can imagine that at times that feels kind of isolating.
Yeah, and I have to sort of remind myself to do it too a little bit, because I tend to be very self-directed. I really will be very hard on myself about my own work and always be working on things, but then to take that time to step out and reach out to other people and see what they think. And I think that's important as well. You can't make books by yourself. It's always a collaboration. It's always a joint process.
There is a question about, do you ever get, I guess not writer's block, but a creative block? It's the writer's block. Artist block. And what do you do for that?
Yeah. You're still writing, even if you're writing with pictures. Yeah, that's I feel like I'll go through plateaus. Like there are periods when I'm working and it feels like I'm getting somewhere. And then there are times when I feel like I'm working and I keep producing things with the same problems and I feel kind of stuck. I think just being curious about the world, being really actively curious, engaged in things, excited about things, excited to learn about new ideas. And that's very, very helpful. And it doesn't have to be art related. Like the Fisherman and the Whale, it was at a music concert, which is not, it doesn't seem like that's going to lead to a picture book, but that was the sort of the catalyst for everything clicking together to make that book. So seeking out interesting new experiences and just making a lot of work. I remember some anecdote I heard, and I'm not sure where it was, but it was like a professor giving two groups of students a task. One was to make as much work as possible, and they were going to be graded by quantity only. And the other was to be graded on one perfect piece. You're just going to only have to do one, but it has to be like the best. And of course, all the best work came from the group that did the quantity, right? It's like you can't just make one good thing. You have to make a whole bunch of stuff, and then one of those things might be good. You know, that's the way ideas work. So it's kind of our job to learn how to come up with ideas. I think anyone can do it.
I love that. I wrote down actively curious. That's my new favorite thing. Thank you, Jessica. Before we jump into Tammy, I know you've got a bunch more questions, and it looks like the audience does too. I just want to remind everybody that we're moving towards this question and answer time. So if you would like to drop in any questions in that Q&A panel, there's a couple in chat as well. I see those, so we will get those answered, but there's also that Q&A panel. So feel free to ask questions, but go ahead, Tammy, I will hand it back to you.
Thanks, Sally. So we will move into the questions, sort of. I've kind of been picking them up along the way because they related to what you were talking about, Jessica. This is a good one. Have you ever thought about doing graphic novels for adults, graphic or illustrated books? Kids' books have all the good art.
I have actually. I have something that, I mean, it's not really a draft. It's just kind of a mishmash of ideas. Yeah, maybe. Maybe. Who knows? I don't want to box myself in here, but I agree. I love those kind of books that are illustrated books, and they don't necessarily have to be for any one specific group of people. Like one of my absolute favorite books is Shantan's The Arrival, which is just that kind of book. It's an illustrated graphic novel for older readers or for kids. It doesn't really matter. For humans, it's huge and gorgeous, and the art's fantastic. Like, I love that book. So I think it's really exciting that there are books being made today that defy categorization. So yeah, I would love to do that someday. I don't know if that will happen, but sometimes we don't know where the creative path will lead us.
Right.
Actually,
right. I guess so. We have to look in all areas to find the great art. So maybe they can't be completely classified because your book is really beautiful to look at. But I thought that was a pretty interesting question.
Yeah,
I guess kids do get the good books. I think I had a question and it slipped out of my head. But
there was another question as Tammy remembers what that one was. We had a question in the chat that is, what was your favorite spread to work on in the book?
Oh, favorite spread to work on. Let me think about this here. Let's see. I don't know. No. Good question. There was a lot of blue in this process. Oh, it's so hard to choose here. The process of actually painting them is pretty similar. One of the spreads, I guess the one I'm most excited about how it ended up turning out, and the editorial process of like putting the pages together in the right order, was the breakthrough. I think it was Liz, my editor, who figured this out, but like to put these two eyes on the same spread, I think like it really makes the book, because in the earlier versions, those were on different pages and it just didn't have the same impact. So I really enjoyed working on that spread. And this one's probably just my favorite painting in general on the book. I have it on my wall. Maybe because it reminds me of, I took a trip to Vancouver Vancouver Island to do some research on boats and to see whales and to get another glimpse of that childhood memory of the foggy Pacific Northwest coast. And it really looked like that, like this. This is like how it felt being there. So it's kind of a memory. I did a lot of sketches on that trip too. Here's some boats. Can you see them? From my sketchbook. Research is important.
Do you generally work in watercolors, or do you work in other mediums? Is that your favored?
Yeah, that's my favored, I guess. I used to do other things. And now I just do that. I don't know why. I really enjoy the process of painting. I like it better than drawing. I'm more of a painter than a drawer. A drawer.
Robert. So whenever you're kind of out and about, do you keep a sketchbook and a pen in your pocket, or do you have a little watercolor kit? I'd love to hear, what that looks like.
I do. I have it. Here, let me show you. I'll go get it. It's over there.
Oh, fun, yeah. And while she goes get that, we can think of what that cat's name is.
Yeah. It looks like my cat Loki, but
or Doris. Maybe she's a Doris cat.
Here we go. My sister Michelle made this for me.
Oh, that's
oh
gorgeous.
wow, that's great.
And it has everything you could want in it. So you just grab this and head out the door. And I use these little, these are really cool. They have water in them. So you don't need to carry water. You just like use the brush.
Ah.
I do a lot of those. I put them on it.
I like those. Who's your friend behind you, Jessica?
The animal?
Yeah.
First, her eyes got wide, like, oh my God, someone's in my house.
I didn't mean to frighten you. Well, we were talking about the cat. We saw the cat.
She's probably considering shredding the sofa. I think that's what is going on.
Well, she definitely wanted to be seen, I think.
Yeah, she hops. She's missing a leg. That's why, if you notice, she's. Yeah, this is Minyan. She's.
Minyan.
Yes, Minzy. We call her.
I guess a question that I had too was, what are you working on in the future? Are there, since you did, this one was, largely about conservation, and certainly conservation of whales. Do you have anything else coming up? Is that something you think about, or is that something that just happened?
So yeah, because of where things are, I don't know if I can, I'm not sure I'm at liberty to discuss some upcoming projects.
I understand.
Sneaky, I like that.
But they may be related to similar themes. And then I do have another book that I'm working on. My second book is an author-illustrator that also I'm not sure if I can announce yet, but
No, I understand.
Shortly, I think.
So
Also
we have
about an animal. Also about an animal, different animal. So a very different animal.
Well, you seem to have a connection with animals. So I was wondering too, if you, if conservation is a thing in your life that you want to help to promote. I know you said in your bio that you are encouraging young people to better understand nature, and I can see that, or better understand the natural world. Is that the kind of message you consciously address a lot of times, or is it just because that's so much a part of you that you do all the animal kind of things?
I think it's both conscious and subconscious, probably. It's I see so many problems coming from environmental problems, but also social problems, coming from the fact that many of us think of nature as being separate from ourselves. And we have this history, like you mentioned at the beginning, Tammy, where we had European settlers coming in who had this idea that we will conquer nature, we will tame nature, we will dominate nature, and nature is this thing other than us, and that wilderness is this pristine place separate from us, and animals are these things below us. And that's such a lonely place to be. And it's not the way that humans have functioned in nature since the dawn of humanity. People have been part of an ecosystem, people have been part of nature. Native indigenous people live within nature in balance with it. These wildernesses and stuff were not empty of humans, right? So I think that that's problematic as an idea, because if we want to live in balance with our world and live sustainably, we need to imagine ourselves as being part of the world and not like a curse on the earth or a cancer or something, but that like we're part of the ecosystem too. And if we can think about it that way, then there's a path forward. And for the next generation, that's going to be more and more of a problem because resources aren't infinite. And that's their reality. They're going to grow up in a world that is harder and harder to live in. And so I feel a lot of obligation to try to combat, I guess, that message that this is something inaccessible to you or separate from you or different from you, but really that I feel this is a part of you, and it's something that every child deserves to have part of their life, if that makes sense.
That's really great. I ask artists a lot of times, do they feel they have a responsibility as an artist? And you just answered that. And that seems to be ingrained in everything you do from when you were growing up and you got to see those beautiful meadows and hang out with the raccoons on the roof. Which I think that really comes through in your illustrations. Although I've only seen the whale and the Fisherman, I definitely want to take a look at your other books. But your artwork certainly that comes through, I think.
I think that's why there's so much emotion in it, because there's like all that emotion in me, so it just comes out on the page. I like the whales. Save the whales.
Right, and the whale. I've been to Victoria Island and or Vancouver Island, Victoria on Vancouver Island, and
Victoria's on. Yeah.
Yeah, and up the side of the island, and I mean, yeah, I can't wait to go back. That is a beautiful, beautiful place. I hope that doesn't change too fast. And as we hope that the Rocky Mountains don't change where we are, where you are, and that I think you'll have a lot of subject matter to draw from for your work in the future too.
Yeah, the hard part is finding the hope. I think sometimes we can feel really discouraged and feel a lot of despair, but there's always beauty. There's always something wonderful to see. Yes,
and you having the book and coming to contact with us, that's a great thing that happened in 2020. Every day when I turn on the news or listen to the news, it's like, can 2020 be over? But I think we had some good with the bad. And there are a lot of people trying to keep the good going. And we've seen a lot of humanity's worst and best, and I think this time. So we're glad that you're around to remind us about the natural parts of of the good.
I guess, yeah, gratitude is the antidote.
Yes. Great. Well, I don't think, I think we covered the questions, Allie, that I had so far. Did anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, it looks like we've got about 8 more minutes until 11. If anybody has any questions, I want to drop those in there. We can probably hit a couple more. Not to move us away from the subject at hand, but just to ask another question because I'm curious. How can you talk about time in your art? How long does it take you to kind of pull together those spreads to finish them up? And I know watercolors can be a little forgiving, right, in time? Or
Yeah, they don't take as long as some things. Definitely not as long as oils. I think I have some more sketches I can show you. I think most of what you do, I can't speak for everybody. But for me, most of what I do making books is like this. It looks like that. And then you make more of them, and it's like a whole pile of just this figuring out what goes on all the pages. And for me, that's the hardest part. It's like the pacing and making sure the story is working and figuring out how to get it to fit in the page count, which can be a real puzzle because you want it to fit just right, in 32 or 40 or whatever pages. And then by the time I get to the final painting, I have such a good idea of what I want it to look like from doing color studies and from sketches so many times and from just sitting with it for, I don't know, half a year even, that by the time I sit down to paint, then that's almost the easier part. I feel like I'm on a cooking show. I have like all the, I have paintings right here. Look, here's a finished one. Oh wait, it's upside down.
Beautiful.
oh, that's awesome.
That's how I, it's spilled here, but.
Here, let me try to make you bigger here so everybody can see that. There you go.
Yeah, that's how they turn out. I've got a whole.
I love the striped long johns. That's.
He shows up. Find him. So yeah, the painting part goes pretty quickly. It's maybe a couple hours, but the planning part is the long part. And sometimes the painting doesn't go well, so then I do it again and again, sometimes again.
Practice makes perfect.
Yeah, sometimes I do it 2 or 3 times or more. We won't talk about that.
make it seem like magic, right?
Yeah, it's effortless. It always goes right.
Which a similar question just popped up here. Do you feel pressured to hurry things up with deadlines, or do deadlines help you kind of get things done?
Deadlines are, I mean, you don't want to not have deadlines, but they're kind of, I don't know. Maybe some people are really punctual. I try to be. I do. I really do. But to me, it's more important that it's good. So if I want to redo something, I will redo it. I will take the time to do it. So to my editors listening out there, you will have working time. Everything's gonna go according to plan.
Fine, you're not procrastinating on anything. It'll all be perfect.
The Fisherman and the Whale was funny because I had already started the final paintings and then we changed the book like significantly. So some of the pages got cut and we changed the order of some of the pages. So I have some extra paintings that never made it in the book. So that was, but I think that's probably more unusual. I've only run into that once. But yeah, deadlines, good stuff.
Great. So we've got, it looks like, I think we covered all the questions that I see. Do you see any more, Tammy?
I haven't. I think it was a great, interesting talk, Jessica. I just wanted to remind everyone that you can get the book in our bookstore and I'm sure online.
It's actually, well, it is online. It's not online on our shop yet, but you can always give us a
Yeah.
call if you wanted us to ship that out, but I'm sure it's online
Yes.
other places.
Yeah, so if you're local in Jackson, you can come into the museum between 10 and 4, Tuesday through Saturday, and get a copy. I see it. Someone mentioned that they were giving it to their son and her grandson, or I don't know if it was her or the person's grandchild and son, because they live in Oregon now. So, which I think is great that they can relate to that.
So I want to jump in and say thank you so much for the time, Jessica. This was amazing, and it was so amazing to pick your brain as an artist. And The Fisherman and the Whale is such a beautiful book to hear all about that. I also want to thank Lynn Fries, who brought the Bull-Bransom Award to the museum, in addition to continues to sponsor the amazing effort of young illustrators that illustrate children books, not child. Bull-Bransom Award.
Yes.
More coffee
yes.
already.
And if all goes well, with everything in the world, Jessica will come to Jackson in the spring, and she's going to be working with some of the grade school kids in the area, the students, about illustration. So we are hoping that that will happen, because that's usually what happens. And we look forward to you visiting us, Jessica.
Thank you both. Thank you, Allie and Tammy, for your generous, kind words and for taking the time to do this. I really enjoyed it. So I hope you all enjoyed it. Thanks for coming, everyone.